Here we are, Skullbrains. It's time to witness the battle between good and evil in the next episode of The Ancestral Trail.
When he, who is the Chosen One, shall tread upon the ancient path and battle there to overcome
the forces of the dark.
The Ancestral Trail, an epic story of myths, magic, and monsters. Book 26, The Evil One. Fight to the finish in the final battle.
In the last episode, Richard, Orkin, and Melik were confronted by the shape-shifting desert creature Fenrir. After he steals their belongings and is about to devour Melik, the three are saved by Ravan, the winged horse guardian of the Ancestral City. Ravan retrieves their belongings as well as the final life force pod and carries the three towards the Ancestral City, where the battle of good versus evil will decide the fate of our heroes. I can't believe it's time. Before we begin, let's go over the ancestral challenges for this issue. Keep an eye out for Shumi and Shubi. Also, in this issue on pages 415 and 416, see if you can spot how many life force pods are incorporated into the design of the armor and clothing of the Guardians. As for Morbane's Monsters and Magic Challenge, you'll find a link in the description to this issue's Monsters and Magic cards. See if you can guess if the evil one is based on vampires or Merlin. If you guessed that Fenrir was based on the legend of werewolves, you were definitely paying attention in the last episode. In the description is a link to this issue's map piece and the next letter token for the Power of Evil challenge. So stick around to the end of the story because I'll be revealing the answers to all of these challenges, and we'll also finally reveal the answer to the Power of Evil challenge. All of those letter tokens you've been collecting, you'll finally know what they are for. We've got a lot to get through. The final battle. Are you ready? Let's do this.
On the 26th day, night arrives with evil force. Terror, bloodshed run their course. Doom awaits on either hand, but victory in sea, on land, brings at last the light of day. Yet do not turn so fast away, for even in the final scene, all is still not what it seems.
For hours, Richard, Orkin, and Melik flew through the air on Ravan's back. Suddenly, the huge horse tilted his wings and started on the long descent to the Ancestral City. The sky was now black, in an unnatural night that Richard knew could only be caused by the Evil One. Darkness obscured the landscape below, but as they drifted down, he could see a ridge of low hills, speckled with campfires ahead. Beyond the hills, Richard could just make out the towering white battlements, and behind them, the turrets and towers that led up to the central citadel. Above the city, the sky was strangely bright. Ravan began to descend. He spread his wings wide and dropped lightly among the trees in the forest outside the city walls. Richard, Orkin, and Melik climbed off his back, groaning as life returned to their stiff limbs. The familiar figure of Jarut was waiting for them. The Guardian greeted Richard enthusiastically. "You have done well," Jarut said after Richard had quickly told him how they had retrieved the final pod. "Your task is almost done, but the Evil One's forces still hold the city. Not until they are destroyed can the pods be returned to the Tree of Life and the Guardians be reinstated. Only then will our world be secure." Jarut's face was grim. "Come, you will attend our Council of War." Jarut led the trio through the forest. Everywhere there were columns of soldiers, their faces showing grim determination for the task ahead. Jarut ushered the three into a large clearing packed with creatures sitting on felled trees or squatting on the ground. Among them, Richard recognized Kika, Zard, Tusker, and Oganga. Where's Golan? Richard asked, feeling sure the old guardian would be there to greet him.
He is with us, in spirit,
Jarut replied.
Not until we reach the Tree of Life will he show himself.
Space was made for the newcomers, and then the council began. Arguments flowed back and forth as to the best way of getting into the city. Many favoured a concentrated frontal attack. Others countered that it would be better to tunnel away under the walls. Everyone had their argument for one or other action. As the hubbub grew, Jarut stood to his full height and called for quiet.
A frontal attack would cost too many lives, he said. There must be a compromise. The dwarf forces will go in ahead and tunnel under the walls. They will give a signal when they are ready to open the gates. Oganga and his bird forces will create a diversion from above. Insect Scout will keep the Guardians informed of enemy activities throughout. The rest of us will divide into 4 groups and be ready to advance simultaneously when we get the signal.
Jarut fell silent and surveyed the assembled throng with piercing eyes. Then he went on.
Zard, you take your troops through the west gate. Tusker, take the east, and Kika the south. Richard, Melik, and Orkin will join me and go in through the north gate. Remember, the Evil One's forces will be ready for us. Be vigilant. And good luck.
Jarut's scheme was greeted with enthusiastic cheers. The other Guardians nodded their agreement. Jarut began to draw up a full battle plan, and the Guardians marshalled their men and melted away into the forest. Darkness filled the sky, and silence lay heavy on the surrounding plain as the forces of good waited to advance towards the Ancestral City. Then the signal came. The dwarf forces were ready to open the gates. Richard, Orkin, and Melik marched with Jarut at the head of a column of mixed forces. Richard could see the bird forces flying above the city to distract the enemy. Many were struck down in midair and went plummeting to the ground. A faint beating of wings signaled that a scout was coming in to report on the situation inside the city. Things did not look good. Massed troops were gathering at the north gate. It looked as if they were preparing to move out to attack Jarut's advancing forces. On hearing the news, Jarut urged his troops forward. Soon the forces of evil could be seen heaving and jostling through the north gate, joining in a tight spearhead of venom towards Jarut. The torches they carried cast a lurid glow, multiplying the shadows and making their numbers seem even greater than they really were. Hoarse shouts and cries of anguish rose from their midst. Jarut's men continued to advance in a pincer movement around the oncoming enemy. Faint cries came from the darkness where skirmishing landsmen had met a group of Khazars. The others took a tighter grip on their weapons and prepared for the onslaught. Arrows and barbed iron darts poured down on the Evil One's forces. Scorpions covered in flames ran here and there, igniting those against whom they brushed. Spiked grapefruits burst against each other like ripe melons. Earwigs and killer bees twitched feebly under bags of flaming pitch. Misshapen creatures of darkness billowed and raged in agony, spreading fear and confusion in their wake. A scout reported to Jarut that troops inside the city were readying catapults and preparing for some sort of onslaught at the west gate. Zard had already been warned of a possible attack. Despite the warning, Richard was taken aback by what he saw next. A volley of fireballs soared through the air towards Zard and his troops, lighting up the sky above like day. The Evil One was bringing his full war machine into play. A second shower of fireballs rose into the sky. They burst on impact, showering Zard's advancing troops with a flaming substance that ate through their armor. Screams filled the air. More fireballs landed amongst Jarut's battling forces. The Evil One was not worried about destroying his own troops along with the forces of good. Jarut spotted a squadron of grapefruits buzzing towards them and urged his troops to advance. Then the signal came.
The gates are open!
Jarut cried. As planned, the forces of good surged through the 4 city gates simultaneously. When at last Richard entered the city, he saw that it was in worse shape than he had previously thought. Some of the buildings had been reduced to piles of rubble and towers lurched perilously on the point of collapse. The battle was raging. Scorpions, Khazards, killer bees, giant earwigs and other creatures teemed through the streets. On a staircase to the battlements, a group of dwarfs were battling for their lives against a tight formation of Khazards. The dwarfs were no match for the Khazards' brutal defense and fell back in disarray. A wedge of earwigs advanced towards Zard, their sickle-shaped horns slashing at the air. The Guardian sliced viciously at the enemy with his battle axe. Green blood spurted heavenwards, and the earwigs retreated, scuttling for protection behind a band of scorpions that swept in from a side street. The fighting was fast and fierce. Jarut had just come under attack by 2 Khazards when Tusker joined him in the fray.
The forces of evil are stronger than I anticipated,
Jarut admitted to the Guardian of Mythical Beasts. Meanwhile, the forces of good and evil were readying for battle underwater. First to strike were Nemesis ghost sailors. They were no match for Dunar's dolphins. The sea mammals launched their bottle noses like battering rams, and before long, the ghost sailors disappeared completely. Then came Suma, dragging herself through the sand with her fearsome talons. In her wake came the giant squid and the stingrays. The forces of good were driven back by their attack, back into the shallows, where Tolosh eagerly awaited them. Tishon and Shunta urged their forces forward, alert to the trap in which they were now caught. Suddenly, the sea turned an odd shade of pink. The alligators had circled round the Tolosh and were attacking them in turn. Claws ripped along soft bellies. Hard tails flailed against fragile skulls. Soon, there was nothing left of the Tolosh, save clumps of fur that floated seaweed-like over the pinkish, white waves. Heartened by this victory, Tishon and Shunta dived straight for Sumar. Before the moss beast knew what was happening, the 2 guardians were at her throat. A swift knife stroke opened her neck to the bone. The squid and stingrays were defenseless prey for Dunar's sea mammals. A few rays made it into shore, only to be devoured by the alligators. The battle at sea was over. Back at the Ancestral City, the forces of good looked on in jubilation as a geyser of flame erupted, consuming hundreds of evil combatants in its explosion before dying down. When an insect scout brought news of the victory at sea, a rolling cheer swept along the city walls. The evil one's powers had been drastically weakened by the carnage at sea. The Guardians and their troops steeled themselves for the final onslaught. The forces of evil were at a disadvantage now. They had relied on sheer weight of numbers and their position to win the day. In the narrow streets, against the original inhabitants of the city, the tables were turned. The forces of good fought their way into houses, up battlements, into secret tunnels. From every window and doorway, missiles hurtled into the evil ranks. The fallen piled on top of each other in bloodied heaps. Those at the front tried to turn back, but were prevented by the press of those behind. The carnage lasted only moments. The sky was lighter now, but the air still had a dark, grainy quality. The scene of destruction that greeted the eye beneath a clear blue sky was horrific. In a daze, Jarut and his forces picked their way through the bodies and smouldering wreckage, recognizing here and there the mutilated remains of their companions. Then they began the long, slow process of sorting the corpses. After much hard work, the battlefield was cleared, the fires doused, and the bodies stacked in 2 large piles, one for evil troops, another for good. Jarut strode forward and solemnly lit the 2 funeral pyres. Twin columns of black smoke rose into the air. Troops lined the walls, watching silently as the flames consumed their comrades. Only when both pyres had died to embers did Jarut speak.
It's finished,
He said warily.
Our lives can begin again.
Jarut motioned Richard, Orkin and Melik to follow him and led them to a place that Richard recognized at once. In front of him stood Golan and the Tree of Life. The old guardian's face wrinkled in delight when he saw Richard.
Well done.
He beamed.
Your path has been long and dangerous, but you have succeeded, as I knew you would.
He peered deep into Richard's eyes.
You have learned much, too.
As Golan spoke, Richard realized just how true this was. He felt stronger, braver, wiser, better able to cope with the unknown. He wondered if it had anything to do with the pods he carried, and if his newfound knowledge would disappear when he handed them over.
Don't worry.
Golan read his mind.
The pods have contributed much, but their true wealth lies in the manner in which you gained them. The value of that experience will remain with you forever.
A sudden thought struck Richard. Who was the guide you said would help me? You mentioned only one, but Orkin and Melik were with me all the way.
Yes.
Golan smiled and stretched out a hand for the pods. As he returned them one by one to the Tree of Life, they radiated a warm golden light.
I said there would be one to guide you,
Golan continued.
but it was neither Orkin nor Melik. Your inner self was your guide.
Richard turned towards Orkin. What he saw left him speechless. All the Guardians were wearing armor of gold. In their midst, complete with his own golden armor and weapons, was Orkin.
Amor, guardian of the common beasts, was killed by the evil one before the final battle.
Golan explained.
Orkin's destiny was to join the Guardians. He takes Amor's place.
What about Melik? Richard asked. Golan laughed and beckoned with his hand. From behind the Guardians stepped a diminutive figure, dressed in fiery vermilion robes. It took Richard a second to realize that this was the ragged scribe who had accompanied him on his adventures.
Melik has been made keeper of the sacred runes,
Golan said.
As such, he will be the leader of his people. Say your farewells, too,
Golan said.
for the time has come for you to return to your own world.
It was hard to believe that it was all over. But suddenly Richard experienced a strong yearning for home. As he said his goodbyes, Richard felt that he was losing true friends.
You have saved our world. You will always be remembered.
Golan said, stretching out a hand.
But the amulet must stay in the ancestral world.
The old man reached forward to retrieve the amulet, which Richard had worn round his neck for luck during the battle. In that instant, the sky turned blinding white, and a red flash seared Richard's eyes. Rising from the center of the city was a towering column of blackness, in which swam two slanted red eyes. For a second, the eyes scanned the battlefield with concentrated malevolence. Then they disappeared, leaving a faint impression of the evil one in the sky. Had evil really been vanquished? And that is the end of book number 26 and the end of this series of the Ancestral Trail. That battle was epic. It was just brutal and didn't hold back any punches. They really weren't afraid of killing off characters in this series, and I think as a kid I appreciated that. I had so much fun making this episode and throwing in more sound effects and really trying to bring this story to life. So, how did you go with the Ancestral Challenge? Did you spot Shumi and Shubi? They were hiding out of harm's way on page 404. Now, you also needed to keep an eye out on how many life force pods could be seen drawn into the armor and clothing of the Guardians. These are the 2 pages. If you want to pause here and see if you can count them all, the answer will be revealed in 3, 2, 1. There are 26 life force pods, the same as the number of issues in this series. Now, I could really only make out 18 of them. See if you can find any more and let me know where they are in the comments below. Now, as for Morbane's Magic and Monsters Challenge, did you think the evil one is based on vampires or Merlin? If you guessed Merlin, you might be just as surprised as I am. I figured the evil one would have definitely been based on vampires and that Golan would have been based on Merlin. But now, let's finally get ready to answer the Power of Evil challenge. Throughout this series, we've been collecting letter tokens that will spell out the secret to defeating the evil one's power. Readers had to decipher the message and also answer the tiebreaker question. Richard was able to complete the quest because... I haven't been able to find any answers to this, so I think it was just subjective. What are your thoughts? Leave a message in the comments below. The lucky winner received an Atari 1040 ST computer so they could play some cutting-edge games like these. love it. The clue we were given to arrange the letter tokens was look to your issues, the secret phrase is already there. So, if we look at the first page of every issue, we'll see the first letter of each book was a letter token. Laid out, they spelled this. If you want to pause now and try and figure out for yourself what the message is, I'll be revealing the answer in 3, 2, 1. All we have to do to get the answer is reverse the letters to spell fear not what is only in the mind. How did you go? Did you figure it out? Unfortunately, I don't have an Atari 1040 ST to send you. I'm sorry. It really has been an honor and a pleasure to read these stories for you all. From all of the comments I get, these books meant a lot to a lot of us growing up, and I really hope new people discover this series. Thank you to Frank Graves for allowing me to show these stories in their entirety and giving access to some of the things that came in the back of the book, like the map pieces, the Monsters and Magic cards, and the letter tokens. Thanks so much for being on this journey with me. I hope you've enjoyed. Thanks so much for being on this journey with me. I hope you've enjoyed watching it as much as I've enjoyed making it. And as always, until next time, stay tuned and stay.
Ha 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 ha!